dark of the night, whispers of deceit.
Shadows dance on the walls.
Secrets they repeat. A shadowed figure
with eyes full of lies.
hiding truths in the shadows where no one dares to pry. Uncover the truth, let the lies come undone. Peel back the layers until the light is shown. Uncover the truth, let the shadows run. Break free from the chains and find the sun. Uncover the truth in the dead of the night, where secrets lie hidden like a whispered bite. Uncover the truth in the dim of the light, where betrayals take root in the heart of the fight. In the rain-soaked streets, under the moon's pale.
All right, we'll let it go.
Oh, yeah. This is Bloodlines and Betrayal. And boy, Coach Schumann, Detective Schumann, and I have a very special episode for you. Being that we are both history buffs,
Yes.
we are going to examine the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, arguably one of the greatest presidents of history. He's definitely in
I'm
the
not
top
rushing.
five.
Mark.
He's in the top five conversation.
In my opinion, number one.
George Washington's number one. So, but he's
I think Washington's.
no, it's Washington. Washington won the Revolutionary War and became president. He's number one. Sorry.
All right. So then you could say two. He's definitely two. Clear cut two.
I'll give him two. I'll probably give him two. And I think
three.
Three I'd put FDR. But a lot of polls have put Lincoln as number one.
I think what Lincoln, well, they both accomplished a ton. I think what Lincoln,
they did.
I think what Lincoln did in a short time period is unmatched.
Yes. He had a great life leading up to, becoming a politician. And then, as he was a politician, he, changed the course of our nation. So that has to be recognized. I didn't even know this. He was born in Kentucky, which is crazy. I had no idea about that. And he was a blue collar guy. The family moved around. They moved to Virginia. They had 3 children, his brothers and sisters, and they all died young because infant mortality was very high back then. His father, I believe, his father
died. His mother died.
Yeah, his mother died, but the father bought farms initially in Kentucky, but he
Tom
could not.
Lincoln, right? Tom.
Yeah, he couldn't get the property titles to any, losing hundreds of acres of land in these legal disputes. And then they moved to Indiana, and that's kind of where he grew up. His father was a farmer, a cabinet maker, and a carpenter. He owned livestock, and he also was an appraiser, which was an esteemed profession back then. And, Lincoln was a Baptist, I believe. So Nancy Lincoln, the mother, died, unfortunately, from milk sickness, which used to happen back then. Leaving Lincoln's sister, who was basically in charge of the household. Lincoln, which is amazing to me, they didn't have the.
But he remarried, didn't he? Remarry?
No. I'm talking about the father.
Yes,
yes. The father did remarry. Yes,
because she loved, even though it was her stepson.
Yes.
Lincoln was her favorite.
Yes. So
even over her own kids, I think.
They had 3 more kids. His half brothers or sisters, whatever. What's largely amazing to me, Lincoln, he didn't come from extreme wealth or anything like that. And he worked on a farm. He was self-educated.
Yes.
He really took time to educate himself. His formal schooling was very, very short. He did not get a lot of time spent in school. I believe he was in school sporadically for a total of less than 12 months from age 7 to 15. But he was such an avid reader, and it was a lifelong interest of his. He would just read and read and read. And that's how he was able to learn so much. And he also worked a full day on the farm. So this guy was busting his tail, blue collar, working his ass off on the farm, and then, reading and trying to learn as much at night. And, one of the most prominent experiences he had was when he was in Louisiana. He witnessed slavery, and that apparently had a big impact on him. So he had some early on romantic interests, but one of his romances, I believe, his girlfriend died. She developed typhoid fever. Lincoln went into a deep depression after the death. Then he met Mary Owens, who he dated, but Owens basically put the pressure on him to marry her, and he refused. So then Robert Smith Todd, a wealthy lawyer and businessman from Lexington, Kentucky, was the father of Mary Todd Lincoln, who ended up being his wife. So that's crazy how that happened. After the one girlfriend died, he met Mary Todd in Springfield, Illinois, and then they became engaged within a year. And he gained finally some wealth because the father was a wealthy attorney. So after that, the marriage was actually quite turbulent. Mary was very, very abusive, verbally, physically violent. They had it was very sad. I mean, they had 4 kids. Robert Todd Lincoln was the only child to live to maturity. They had several other children that died as infants, which was, Lincoln loved children. He wanted a big family, and unfortunately, he was unable to have that. He did participate in professional wrestling, which I am so happy to say. He worked at a general store, and then he also gained a reputation for his strength, because he, to this day, I believe, is the tallest president at 6'4", and he was a wrestler. He would wrestle on the side, and that's when in 1832 he finally declared his candidacy for the Illinois House of Representatives. But he interrupted his campaign to serve as a captain in the Illinois militia. So it's just he had an incredible early political career. He was a state legislator in Illinois. He served 4 terms in the House of Representatives for Illinois. And he became finally a congressman, the U.S. House of Representatives in 1843. He was part of the Whig Party, which I don't know if there's Republicans, Democrats. What would the Whigs be considered?
That was more towards Republicans. That became the Republican Party took over for the Whig Party.
Okay. And then he eventually went to law school, which is even more amazing. Because the father was a lawyer, he went to law school, he believed in the law, and he went to law school. So in 1854, that's when he started to become conservative. He became a Republican leader. He was against slavery, and he tried legislation aimed to end it. Obviously, the South felt much differently. And even the Whigs were split by it, which I think is why
that's what formed the Republican Party.
Exactly. That's what the new Republican Party was formed. There were a couple violent confrontations. There was a violent confrontation right before the Republican National Convention. And then Lincoln received the support he needed to run, but the party actually went against him and put a ticket of John C. Freeman and William Dayton. And Lincoln was a good soldier. He supported this, and James Buchanan ended up winning. So, there were also the Lincoln-Douglas debates that were famous that actually are part of school to this day. And in 1860, he finally, he ran for president. Throughout the 1850s, he doubted the prospects of a civil war, and his supporters rejected claims that his election would incite the secession. But when Douglas was selected as the candidate for the Northern Democrats, delegates from the Southern slave states elected incumbent Vice President John C. Breckinridge as their candidate, and a group of the Whigs, known as the Constitutional Union Party, nominated John Bell. Lincoln and Douglas competed for votes in the North. Bell and Breckinridge competed in the South. And unfortunately, Lincoln was finally elected in 1860. He was the first Republican president, and his victory was entirely due to support in the North and the West. No ballots, I repeat, no ballots were cast for him in 10 out of the 15 Southern slave states. So he had 39.8% of the total in a four-way race, carrying the northern states as well as California and Oregon. His presidency was 1861 to 1865. And, the South was furious from the beginning. And that's kind of what caused a lot of the dissension. They wanted to secede from the Union. Six of themselves declared to be sovereign nations, Confederate States of America. As we know, Jefferson Davis was their president. And then like the upper South, the border states, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, Missouri, and Arkansas, they refused to succeed. But again, there was just constant, they were combative with each other. And, Lincoln really wanted to unify everyone. And, there was extra security around him. He traveled in disguise because he was, depending on where he was hated. So that is what is so crazy. He did so many great things, but he was at a battle from day one because of slavery, because he wanted to end slavery. So the plan for his assassination, which, I didn't know at the time, they initially were going to kidnap him. John Wilkes Booth was going to participate in kidnapping him. And, Jefferson Davis passed the law saying that they weren't going to release black soldiers, and because they wanted to release black for white. That didn't happen, and that caused a lot of issues. Booth was the one who came up with the plan to kidnap Lincoln in order to blackmail the Union into resuming prisoner exchanges. And this is key. So he recruited Samuel Arnold, George Azerat, David Harold, Michael O'Laren, Lewis Powell, John Surratt, and then Mary Surratt. And the only reason I remember Mary Surratt because she was the first female ever executed. Booth and Lincoln did not even know each other, but Lincoln was actually a fan of Booth. He saw him several times at Ford's Theater, and he thought he was an incredible, talented actor. So most people had multiple theories on Booth's motivation. He wrote letters to his mother. He wrote letters to his brother. He said, like, this man sincerely wanted to avenge the South. Like, he took this personally. He greatly admired abolitionist John Brown. John Brown really inspired Booth to go through with what he did. So on April 11th, Booth attended Lincoln's last speech, in which Lincoln promised voting rights for emancipated slaves. Booth said, quote, "This means N-word citizenship. That is the last speech he will ever give." That's how enraged Booth was. And, Booth got Powell. He wanted him to shoot Lincoln on the spot, but he could not do this during the speech because he just couldn't get a shot off. He couldn't get close enough. And what's even crazier, and I saw this on a documentary, I don't know if you know this, 3 days before his death, Lincoln was having premonitions that he was going to die. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that I didn't realize that he was a fan of John Wilkes Booth as an actor.
He was. He loved him as an actor and saw him several times in several plays. But 3 days before his death, he had a dream where he was wandering the White House for the source of mournful sounds, and he saw a casket which had his corpse in funeral vestments, and there were stationed soldiers who acted as guards. And he asked the question, "Who was dead in the White House?" And the soldiers said, "It's you. You were killed by assassination." So this has been verified by several people.
Wow.
Which I can't imagine. Like, this guy had premonitions and like knowing like he could die, like he was going to be assassinated. But Lincoln initially was very disturbed, freaked out by this, but then he kind of came around and said, it was just a dream. It wasn't me. I must have misinterpreted it. So for months, Lincoln looked pale and haggard because he wasn't sleeping much. He was stressed. The Emancipation Proclamation obviously caused so many issues and incited more hatred in the South. And then John Wilkes Booth on April 14th, like, this dude went all in. He wrote a letter to his mother, basically confessing that he was doing this. He said that our cause being almost lost, something decisive must be something decisive.
Originally had planned on kidnapping Lincoln.
Didn't you hear me just say that, or you weren't paying attention?
No, yeah, but when it was when they actually lost, then that's when he.
Yes, yeah. At that speech, he was going to kidnap him to get slave trades removed, started again. But he wrote his mother saying that something decisive and great must be done because our cause is almost lost. So this is even more nuts. While visiting Ford's Theater around noon to pick up his mail, Booth learned that Lincoln and Grant were going to be at the theater that night for a performance of Our American Cousin. And this provided him with the best opportunity he'd ever have to attack Lincoln and assassinate him. He knew the theater's layout because he performed there many times. And Booth went to Mary Surratt, her boarding house in D.C., and asked her to deliver a package to a tavern in Maryland. He also asked her to tell her tenant, Louis Wetchman, to be ready with guns and ammunition that Booth stored there. Booth's whole idea was this assassination would rekindle the Civil War. That's kind of why, people speculate, but I personally believe that was his motive. The assassination, he was going to blame it on somebody else, maybe a black person, and incite the restarting of the Civil War. So the co-conspirators met for a final time at 8:45 p.m. Samuel Powell was assigned to kill Secretary of State William H. Seward at his home. Sam Azarat was to kill Vice President Andrew Johnson at the Kirkwood Hotel. And, Booth was the only well-known member of the conspiracy. Nobody really knew the other people. Access to and that's why he was able to get access to the upper floor of the theater where the presidential box, it was restricted, but because he was such a well-known actor and he performed there so much, he was able to get by. Like nobody paid attention. There was no difficulty of him getting up there. And I just think of that today, like with all the Secret Service around. I think of, when Trump got shot, how derelict our Secret Service was and how long it took them to get to him. But even this at a theater, Booth was just wandering around and, nobody questioned him. Nobody did anything. And he was able to gain access to the presidential box where, and the other truth to this is Lincoln almost didn't go. I don't know if you knew that. He almost didn't go because his wife wasn't feeling well. So they were close to not going. So what happened was, despite everything that was planned, Grant and his wife declined to go because Mary Todd Lincoln and Julia Grant were not on good terms, which is just also funny. And then the others that declined were Major Henry Rathbone and his fiance, Clara Harris, the daughter of the U.S. Senator Ira Harris in New York. They accepted. Now, this is what I was talking about. Mary developed a headache and wanted to stay home. But Lincoln told her, because it was reported in the newspapers and around the world, that she had to attend. William H. Crook, one of Lincoln's bodyguards, advised him not to go, but Lincoln said he had promised his wife, and he told the Speaker of the House, "I suppose it's time to go, though I would rather stay," before assisting his wife, because his wife had migraines, a very bad headache, whatever. So they get to their box. It's, it's seated up top. It's really special. It's divided. The orchestra was playing Hail to the Chief. There were 1,700 people who rose in applause. Lincoln was in a rocking chair that was selected for him. And the cast even modified the play in honor of Lincoln. They changed like some of the script around because, they wanted to pay homage to Lincoln for all the great work that he's done. And, Mary Lincoln was very excited about this. And Lincoln actually took great pleasure in the changing of this, because he knew the play, he knew the script, he knew they went off script to honor him. And Mary Lincoln said that he was so happy that they did this. So in following years, this is what is true. Miss Harris, Mary Todd Lincoln whispered to Lincoln while holding his hand, "What will Miss Harris think of my hanging on to you so?" Lincoln replied, "She won't think anything about it." In following years, these words were considered Lincoln's last. Later on, they claimed that he said something in Jewish, but no, he said something about wanting to visit Jerusalem, but that's unproven. So Booth, Lincoln's usual protection in place that night at Ford's Theater. Yeah. Crook was on a second shift at the White House. Lincoln's personal bodyguard was away on assignment in Richmond from Lincoln. John Frederick Parker was assigned to guard the presidential box. So at intermission, this motherfucker went to a tavern along with Lincoln's valet, Charles Forbes, and coachman Francis Burke. Booth had several drinks waiting for his planned time. So the guy's sitting there drinking, and he watches Lincoln's personal bodyguards leave. And there's nobody there. It's just Lincoln and his wife.
Spread the conspiracy theories of a setup.
Well, not only that, yeah, but Booth possibly surviving. So, in any event, there is no certainty that entry would have been denied to a celebrity such as Booth, like I said, because he was a famous actor, well known. He's performed before. People still think that he would have been granted access, and especially because Lincoln was a fan. So Booth entered the theater right around 10:10, and he went through the front entrance, and he passed through the dress circle that went to the door that led to the presidential box. After showing Charles Forbes his calling card, Navy surgeon George Todd saw Booth arrive, and he gave testimony at 10:25. A man came in, walked slowly, and I heard a man say, "There's Booth." I turned my head, and he's still walking very slow. He was near the presidential box when he stopped, took a card from his pocket, wrote something on it, and gave it to the usher, who took it to the box. In a minute, the door was opened and he walked in. This is how dumb these people are. They let this guy walk in. He gives a note to the usher.
Idiots.
And I get, yeah, okay, it may be like Brad Pitt doing a presidential play, and they let him in, or George Clooney, whatever. So once inside the hallway, Booth barricaded the door by wedging a stick between the wall. From the second door that led to Lincoln's box, evidence shows that earlier in the day, Booth had boarded a peephole in the second door. Booth knew the play, Our American Cousin, and he waited to the time when he shot him around 10:15 because he knew the script and he knew when there was going to be a laughter and an applause. So one of the lines was, "Well, I guess I know enough to turn you inside out, oh gal, you sock dogging old man trap." Lincoln was laughing as like hell at this line. Booth opened the door, stepped forward, shot him from behind with his pistol. The bullet, yeah, exactly. The bullet entered Lincoln's skull behind his ear, passed through his brain, and came to rest near the front of his skull, fracturing both orbital plates. Lincoln slumped over in his chair, then fell backwards. Rathburn turned to see Booth. Rathburn was the idiot fucking the guy that he gave the card to let him in. Booth standing with gun smoke less than 4 feet behind Lincoln. Booth shouted a word that Rathburn sounded like freedom, but it turned out to be. So what happened was Rathburn jumped from his seat, struggled with Booth. He dropped the gun, drew a dagger, and stabbed Rathburn. Rathburn grabbed at Booth again, and then in desperation, Booth jumped from the box, which was a 12-foot drop. Booth's riding spur became entangled in a treasury flag decorating the box. He landed awkwardly on his left foot. And then he was crossing the audience, but the audience thought he was part of the play. Like, the audience didn't think this was real at first. They thought all this was part of the play.
Why would you?
Because there was changes in the script, so they thought maybe this was just part of the play. So as Booth held the bloody knife over his head, he yelled to the audience, "Sic semper tyrannis."
That's
which
tyrants, or
death to tyrants. Most recall hearing "Sic semper tyrannis," and some didn't recall Booth saying anything in Latin. There's still uncertainty, but he also may have yelled, "The South is revenge for the South." After it was just chaos. Mary Lincoln was screaming. Clara Harris, the daughter of Ira Harris, the senator, was screaming, yelling, "Stop that man." Others tried to chase him. Now, Booth planned this actually very well. He exited through a side door, and on the way, he stabbed the orchestra leader. He leapt onto his getaway horse, and he got away.
Did anyone else have guns in this place?
Apparently not, because his normal bodyguards were away. So
average citizens.
The average citizens couldn't get to him because he was smart, because he passed through the orchestra and there was confusion that this was part of the play. Right. So nobody stopped. So unfortunately, this is the crazy part too. Charles Leal, a young army surgeon, pushed through the crowd door of the presidential box. He couldn't open it. They had to remove the wooden brace that jammed the door, with Booth jammed it with. He found Lincoln seated with his head leaning to the right. Mary held him and sobbed. His eyes were closed and he was probably comatose. His breathing was intermittent, and he thought Lincoln was stabbed at first. Leal shifted him to the floor. Meanwhile, another physician, Charles Sabin Taft, was lifted into the box from the stage. They cut off his collar, unbuttoned his coat, and they couldn't find the stab wound. So they had no idea what was going on. It took them a while before they actually found the gunshot wound behind the left ear. He found the bullet too deep to be removed, but he was able to dislodge a blood clot, and that improved Lincoln's breathing. But he learned regularly removing new clots maintained Lincoln's breathing. After giving Lincoln artificial respiration, which was very, very new back then, Leal allowed actress Laura Keene to cradle the president's head in her lap. He pronounced the wound mortal. So this is what's crazy is this is a young army surgeon who was like in his 20s, and he is charged with trying to tend to the president, save his life. So they had a quick meeting. Leal, Taft, and another Dr. Albert King decided that Lincoln had to be moved to the nearest house because a carriage ride to the White House would be too dangerous. 7 men picked him up and carried him out of the theater. There was a mob that was forming that was angry. And, it was just as chaotic could be. They brought him to the house of Taylor William Peterson, and they put him on the bed. After clearing everyone out of the room, Mrs. Lincoln, the doctors, cut away the clothes, didn't discover any other wounds, but they saw he was cold. They applied hot water. Now, this is where they kind of made mistakes. Back then, they thought bloodletting was helpful. So they would, put cuts in, and they thought you would bleed out the infection. And they kept removing the blood clots to relieve pressure to the brain. And, they tried to hold his hand. He was showing no real signs of life. His son had arrived at 11, but they tried to distract him. And, the United States, Mrs. Lincoln was sobbing and sick and had to leave the room for the rest of the night. He essentially Edward Stanton was the guy who ran basically the country for the rest of the night from the house, including directing the hunt for Booth and his co-conspirators. The guards kept the public away, but they had so many physicians admitted trying to help, trying to do something. Initially, Lincoln's features were calm, but his breathing was slow and steady. He had an eye that was swollen, but he just wasn't improving. As he neared death, Lincoln's appearance became perfectly natural, except for the discoloration around his eyes. 7 a.m. came. Mary came to his side, and as Dixon reported, she seated herself by the president, kissing him, calling him every endearing name. Lincoln died at 7:22 a.m. Mary Lincoln was not present in his last moments. Lincoln's face became calm, his breathing quieter. Field wrote, "There's no apparent suffering, no convulsive action, no rattling of the throat, that he just stopped breathing." Okay, this was the line I was wrong. It was Edward Stanton who knelt in prayer and said, "Now he belongs to the ages, or now he belongs to the angels." On Lincoln's death, it was Johnson that became the 17th president of the state, and the oath of office was administered at 10 a.m. The other attack actually did happen. It was against William H. Seward on the night of the assassination. he went through with it, but Seward ended up surviving.
I think he was knifed, I think.
Yeah. Now the funniest part was
The other one was Johnson. The guy who was supposed to take out Johnson did not.
Yeah, he got drunk and didn't go.
Didn't go.
He got drunk and didn't go. So this was even more impressive. The funeral for him, they put him on a train and drove him around the country. So every American would get an opportunity to mourn him. And he was in a walnut casket, and this trip lasted a very long time. Ulysses S. Grant called Lincoln the greatest man he ever knew. Even Robert Lee expressed sadness despite the war. And John Wilkes Booth was furious because the war did not restart. That was what he wanted. So Booth, he crossed into Maryland, and he was able to pass through some questioning, and he made it. The plan was to go to Samuel Mudd's house. Samuel Mudd was a local doctor. He splinted his leg, gave him a pair of crutches. But then they took him to Samuel Cox's house. In turn, took him to Thomas Jones, a Confederate sympathizer who hid Booth, and that was the plan. He was going to hide until the heat wore down. In an April 15th letter, George Brainerd Todd from his brother tells the rumors. Oh, okay. Today, all the city is mourning, every house being in black. I have not seen a smile, no business, and many strong men I've seen in tears. Some reports say Booth is a prisoner, others that said he made an escape. But because obviously communication took so much time back then, nobody knew. Nobody knew where he was. They put out an award equivalent to $1 million and 25 grand for Harold and Surratt. They eventually, Booth and Harold were sleeping, and on April 26, when soldiers from the New York Cavalry arrived, surrounded the barn, and threatened to set it on fire. The Harold surrendered. Booth cried out, "I will not be taken alive." And then the soldiers set fire to the barn. Booth ended up shooting himself in the head, I believe. He shot and he severed his spinal cord, and he died. And that was it. He died on the porch of the Garnett farm within 3 hours. Corbett was initially arrested for disobeying orders from Stanton that Booth be taken alive, but was later released largely because he was made a hero to the public. So all the co-conspirators were arrested. Anyone who was involved: Samuel Arnold, George Astronaut, David Harold, Samuel Mudd, Michael O'Loughlin, Mary Surratt, who was the first female ever executed. The accused were tried by a military tribunal ordered by Johnson, and the prosecution was led by a congressman.
Which was controversial at the time.
It was very controversial to use a military tribunal. There was a lot of criticism for that. They believe
what is the because
the Secretary of State believed that a civil court should have presided because of the jurisdiction nature. But Attorney General James Speed pointed to the military nature of the conspiracy and the facts that the defendants
of the government attempt.
Well, that's the thing. The defendants acted as enemy combatants.
Yeah.
That martial law was in force. at the time in the District of Columbia because they were trying to get the war restarted. The trial was 7 weeks. 366 witnesses testified. All defendants were found guilty. And then on June 30th, Surratt, Lewis Powell, David Harold, George Azarat were sentenced to death by hanging. Samuel Mudd, Samuel Arnold, and Michael O'Laren were sentenced to life in prison. After sentencing Mary Surratt to hang, 5 members of the tribunal signed a letter recommending clemency, but Johnson did not stop the execution of her. Mary Surratt, Powell, Harold, and Azarat were hanged at Old Arsenal Penitentiary. And as I said, Mary Surratt was the first person executed.
And still, there's still a debate as to whether she was involved or forced.
Well, there's also debate. The Booth family to this day thinks he got out of that fire, thinks that he survived. And there's conspiracy theories that he survived and moved and then renamed it. He renamed himself and he lived in Philadelphia. I'm just trying to double.
How is that possible?
I don't know.
Identification was disputed
because he was burned, and I think he was cremated and buried.
Died. It was him, and then they said they've seen people have claimed to see Booth alive in various places, Texas, Mexico.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the thing because he was cremated immediately.
Well, and the other conspiracy was that the Union soldiers who killed him, that he was killed to silence him. So
yes, 100%. So I was just trying to see
popular escape theories. Here are the 3 popular escape theories.
Yes, the conspiracy theories. Yes.
John St. Helen in Texas, 1903.
John St. Helen, that's the one. Yes, that's the one I believe.
A man in Eden, Oklahoma, claimed on his deathbed to be Booth.
Yes.
After his death, his mummified body was displayed in sideshows for decades.
Yes, it was, and then it got lost.
Because they probably bringing it from town to town.
It used to be part of a circus. They take it everywhere, and they said it was Booth's body. But
story matched Booth's history too well to be coincidence. The second one is Finis L. Bates' book, The Escape and Suicide of John Wilkes Booth. Claimed Booth lived under aliases and died in 1903. The book fueled widespread belief in conspiracy.
But here's the thing.
And then the Booth mummy. Yeah, like you talked about. Yeah.
The Booth
disappeared in the 1970s.
John Wilkes Booth's descendants.
So John St. Helen
petitioned the court is recently, I think is 10 years ago, maybe less, to have his body exhumed and DNA tested because they don't believe it's him. And they were denied.
Why?
Because of the burning, there isn't a lot of DNA evidence, and to test it would compromise some of it, or they'd lose it. And they didn't really believe it to be true, or they just don't want it to be true. So it's just the whole thing's amazing to me that this actor, who was really a brilliant man, and he was a talented actor, planned this successfully, and like everything he planned went perfectly to a T. Like he knew the lines so well of the play where there was going to be laughter. He got in early enough to create a peephole. He boarded the door of the presidential booth. He got by the freaking usher by handing him a card. And, Ulysses Grant didn't end up going. And Lincoln, I don't know if he knew that the Lincoln bodyguards weren't going to be there, but still, it's amazing to me that he pulled it off. And then he escaped because people thought it was part of the play. People like thought this was part of the play, that the president got shot. Like Mary Lincoln is screaming and they think, oh, it's just part of the play. So he's able to escape through the orchestra.
Well, thinking about how crazy
he had a horse
times
waiting
were
for him.
and how unsophisticated things were.
No, I know.
It's amazing how like guys are just getting drunk at the back bar. Like,
yeah, he forgets the guy that got drunk that forgot to kill Johnson. The other guy, he didn't end up killing Seward.
Drinking, hanging out, like waiting for his moment.
Yeah, he knew the exact time. He knew the exact time. He's like, I'm not just going to hang out and wait all play. I'm going to go drink, hang out. Right around 10:10, I'll get up there. 10:15, I'll take my shot. Because he knew the lines of the play. He knew where the applause was going to be. Amazing. It's just amazing how it happened.
And then the rise of Andrew Johnson was a terrible president.
Yeah, he was a disaster. He was a disaster. He was the only one successfully impeached, correct?
Yes, he opposed civil rights for the freed slaves.
Yeah,
and then part of that was then the Republicans became radical and basically imposed like military rule in the South. And
he was awful. But back then it was, you didn't get to choose a running mate. It was usually first and second.
Yes, that's the problem. Correct.
That was the problem. And I had no idea that Lincoln was the first Republican president. Yeah, but he lived such I understand why people consider him the greatest president of all time and why he would be in the top two. The slavery, being able to abolish that, unifying the country, ending the Civil War was remarkable.
And he was young when he died. He was 50.
Very young. I mean, old for back then, but
back then, yeah, not right.
But still, I mean, Obama was in his 50s. I mean, it's just amazing, and just the fact that the doctor was this 20-year-old guy just out of med school that was like trying to treat him, trying to get the bullet out, and all they could do was get rid of the blood clots, and they were doing this bloodletting back then, which what they believed in, where they would cut you and have you bleed out because they thought it would bleed out like the disease. And they people have said even to today, they don't think he could have been saved. But it was suspect that Booth was just cremated and buried at sea. Like
what was also amazing was the number of jobs Lincoln held.
Yeah, he did everything. Until
he became a lawyer in his late
20s. He was a blue collar guy. He worked on a farm. He wrestled, and he was self-educated. He just by reading and just having such natural intelligence, like I do, where you can learn on your own and you don't need people to teach you. And he got lucky marrying into wealth to marry Todd Lincoln. And what's also sad is Mary Todd Lincoln never remarried. She never got over. Obviously,
she was probably older at that point too.
No, she was, but she never got over the loss of her husband. And it's just sad.
A strange relationship too.
It was volatile. It was a volatile relationship for a while. Until he became president, it was not the best marriage. But it was never on Lincoln's side. Like, she was more abusive to him. I
see.
But, if you look at it.
37 when he died.
Who?
She was only 37. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
47.
Yeah,
47.
she was young. But, it'd be interesting to see what would have happened with Lincoln in the second term. How much more would he have done?
I think he would have done a lot.
Well, the ending of the Civil War, bringing the country together, is, still considered like the greatest thing ever that's been done.
Yes. Probably in
Because
the history of the world, usually these civil wars don't work out well.
no, look at, we talk about Israel and Palestine and all that. I mean, we were
Look
close.
at Africa. Look at all the civil wars in Africa.
We were close to, being two separate countries, the North and the South, all over slavery.
And the
Emancipation Proclamation was what saved it. So
yeah, these civil wars a lot of times, like especially the way it was along geographic lines, which was unusual too, right? So a lot of times these civil wars, even when you have factions like in Africa, and this faction attacks that, it's not necessarily geographic. It's more tribal. It's more tribal.
That's what it is. It's tribal. It's belief.
It's belief systems.
It's
really truly
it's nationalism. Nationalism can cause a lot.
Yes, but this civil war was literally geographic.
It was geographic, brothers killing brothers.
Not religion, was.
You're right.
It was
not about money.
Value systems. That's what it was. It's purely value systems.
Yeah.
And value systems and monetary. There definitely was an element of
finance involved.
Monetary success to it too, because the industrialization of the North.
Well, yeah.
The agricultural needs of the South.
The Industrial Revolution came along,
that came a little after, but it was beginning at that time.
The early 1900s, right?
And you could argue that one of the greatest inventions of all time,
the printing press. Oh, the Eli something, whatever, invented that.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I have to get running. I have to get to another show.
Oh,
this was a very, very polarizing special episode. Bloodlines and Betrayals, the assassination of Lincoln. Did John Wilkes Booth really make it out? Did he live as John St. Helen? Why won't the government exhume his body and test his DNA? They allegedly have autopsy pictures. I mean, they could put it to rest, but they won't. It's one of those conspiracy theories, just like the Kennedy assassination. You never know. And, Trump almost was assassinated. So, we had 5 comments. I didn't even see this. Oh, nobody I know. Okay. So, yeah, thank you. This has been another banner, Bloodlines and Betrayal. I have to go to my animal shelter podcast and hopefully get the dog food people. I will text you later. And just remember, when life gives you lemons, don't make lemonade. Take 2 oranges, throw them right back at life.